I thought it was time to actually test these Photoshop alternatives everyone keeps talking about, to decide once and for all if Adobe is dead. To decide if Adobe is dead. So here's GIMP's homepage. Allow me to show you around a little bit. But I should let you know right off the bat that GIMP is an open source program. So it's basically a homebrew from a bunch of Adobe anarchists who are trying to set their world on fire. But the layout does look a little similar to Photoshop. Well, kind of. Well, not really. But they do have a pretty good variety of design tools. And speaking of variety, let me tell you exactly how we're going to put Adobe to the test today. So we have 3 different programs to cover. And with each program, I'm going to recreate a different popular Photoshop tutorial from YouTube. And as I'm saying this out loud, I'm already realizing this is way too much work. Let's start with something super simple in GIMP and replace the background on this tree photo. Just kidding. Ain't nobody got time for that. All right, let's see what we're working with here. Start a new file on toilet paper. Well done. 1 point to the anarchist. You know what? Let's see if it'll open a PSD file. God forbid we have to create all of our Photoshop work all over again. Oh, and here's the tutorial we're going to recreate in GIMP. I know it's from a few years ago, but I'm trying to give GIMP a fair chance. All right, so I went to open my PSD file, and it asked me for my social security number and debit pin. I should probably look into what all this means, but we got a lot to do today. Let's go. All right, so I have my image loaded in GIMP, and I know the first thing I have to do is cut out the subject because we're going to turn this into this. Now let's go back to our Photoshop tutorial and see how to do this.
You just got to select the magic wand tool, the quick selection tool, or the object selection tool, and at the top you will see select subject.
Cool, that seems easy. Let's do the same thing in GIMP. So the tools are obviously going to be different, but let's try this one. It looks like the magic wand tool. All right, so the fuzzy select tool. This should work. All right, maybe here, here. All right, so this obviously isn't gonna work. So let's try something else. We'll try this one. No, this one. It looks like the lasso tool. Well, what the
That escalated quickly.
Okay, we obviously need help. All right, maybe this video has the answer.
With the Paths tool selected, begin clicking around the edges of your subject to place individual points that will make up an outline. You can curve the lines between them by clicking and dragging them in the direction you'd like them to go, then by manually adjusting the handles.
All right, I got it. Got our Paths tool, and let's go. Oh, this is cool. It's kind of like using the pen tool in Photoshop. This is easy. A few minutes later, and here we go. Let's make a copy of that layer and add a mask. Now I skipped ahead and put a mask for the shadow, because now it's time for the fun part, the background.
But to keep things simple, we're gonna go the old-fashioned route. So let's choose the gradient tool right now.
Hopefully this will be a lot easier. Just create a new layer, name that gradient. Maybe GIMP's not that bad. It's kind of similar to Photoshop. The tools, the menus kind of look the same. Oh, well, okay, well, I'll create a custom gradient and, well, what is all this? Okay, here we are. Let's change our colors with the gradient. Oh my gosh. Where's the color picker? Alright, here we go again. Let's find out how to reset this gradient tool. Okay, this is just ridiculous.
1 eternity later.
Well, here we go. I had to skip ahead a little bit. I would still fix her skin tone, and there's some areas that are way too hot, but all in all, it wasn't a bad... Yeah, it wasn't a great experience. Here are my thoughts on working in GIMP. Now, I would expect the learning curve to be steep, and that's fine, but some of these things are just unnecessarily complicated. What takes seconds in Photoshop can take you minutes in GIMP. Even a basic task like subject isolation had to be done manually. So for ease of use, I'm giving GIMP a C-. GIMP has a decent amount of tools, and I've ungrouped them so you can see all of them here. And I'm assuming GIMP 3.0 will have even more colorful tools. But here's the deal breaker. There's no non-destructive editing. In Photoshop, you can add adjustments, hide them, tweak them, all without touching the base image. But in GIMP, changes are made directly to the image. So for features, I'm giving GIMP a C+. Now, GIMP is free, which sounds great, but let's be real, your time has value too. For beginners, or if you're willing to take the time to learn, then sure, it's fine. But for professional editors, the lack of smart objects and adjustment layers, raw file processing power, it's gonna cost you more than just a Photoshop subscription. And so for value, I'm gonna give GIMP a B. GIMP gives power to the people, which is awesome, but not to the pixels. So for a final grade, I'm giving GIMP a C+. In a short moment, I'm gonna review the program that I thought was the best competitor to Photoshop. And for those of you who are seriously thinking of switching over, I created a free complete guide that will make getting started super easy. It's a guide that I know I'm gonna need when I'm switching over. So I went ahead and created it for all of us. More on that shortly. Photopea is a program that you should definitely look out for because it resembles Photoshop in so many ways. Well, except for this one. Yeah, Photopea has stinking ads. But still, I'm already feeling more at home here. Allow me to show you around. Oh, but before I show you around, I should let you know that Photopea is a web-based application. So you're not going to be able to download it onto your computer. You have to work on it on the web. And it sometimes skips or lags when you have big files or high-res images. Oh yeah, and there's no autosave. So if the page crashes, you'll lose your unsaved work. But Photopea is a much more advanced program than GIMP, so things like image selection and adjustment layers. What's that? Watch an ad to skip waiting. Just to use the tools? I'm not gonna pay for it, so you gotta be joking.
A little longer than a few moments later.
As I was saying, features like subject selection and adjustment layers are already built into Photopea, so we can skip that part. What I want to test is channel masking, like in this Photoshop tutorial. Let's see how far Photopea can go with isolating more difficult objects like hair on a doll. Alright, so if you already know Photoshop, then you pretty much know Photopea. And Photopea opens Photoshop files, so we can start with our tutorial image. We're going to use our channels to create our selection, and we need to find the channel that has the biggest contrast between the background and the foreground. It looks like it's this one. We'll duplicate that channel by dragging it onto the new layer icon. The first part of the tutorial is done, but now we need to separate the background from the foreground a little bit to make our selection.
And what I want to do is keep the dog as bright as possible and the background as dark as possible. So usually what I like to do is start with the dodge or burn tools to darken with the burn tool, or to brighten with the dodge.
So let's find the burn tool in Photopea and adjust to the shadows because those are the pixels we want to affect, and change the exposure. This is just like Photoshop. Oh boy, here we go. It's starting to lag. Oh, come on. Okay, so let's try this again. Alright, burn tool, isolate the background. This is my sped up magic trick so you can't see how much is lagging. And then the dodge tool to increase my highlights for more contrast. We use the lasso to fill in the other areas. Why is this still lagging? There has to be a fix for this. See what Reddit has to say. First answer we find, we're going with. Let's try a new incognito window. You know what? I'll even switch up the channel this time. Alright, here we go. Time for the big test. Come on, Photopea, please work this time. No, but seriously, this is becoming way too dramatic. Let's go to the debrief. Well, I think we can skip right to the grade on this one. It's not a total failure, but they definitely have to figure out the whole lag thing. Because honestly, Photopea could be a great substitution for Photoshop. For beginners, Photopea might even be better because the tools are easy to navigate and the interface is super intuitive. That also gives us a perfect chance to talk about what's missing with Photopea's tools. You can't customize your workspace by moving tools around. You're stuck with the layout that they give you. And advanced features like 3D and AI tools are either limited or they're just not there. Some of the more complex filters that Photoshop has are missing too. The raw editor is more basic and it doesn't have all the advanced adjustment options like Photoshop. But all that being said, Photopea still deserves a B+ for its tools and features. I found it to be one of the closest alternatives to Photoshop out there, and if you're quick to learn, you're going to find that it's an easy switch. Now, let's discuss these ads. Photopea keeps its platform free through advertising, and that makes sense for revenue. The problem is how much these ads disrupt everything. When they refresh, the whole program stutters or lags, and it makes precision tools nearly impossible to use. Remember that crash we had? It happened because Photopea was trying to handle the tool we were using while refreshing ads at the same time. And then there's that 25-second ad that we had to watch to use a certain tool. It's just not okay. And yeah, there's a $5 monthly option to remove the ads, but looking strictly at the free plan, I have to give it a C-. Making it free is nice, but not when it's this frustrating to use. Adding it all up, Photopea lands at a C. It has some really solid features, but the constant ad interruptions and the usability issues makes it really hard to recommend unless you're willing to pay for the ad-free version. Now, I've given 2 of the programs my own grade, but I want to hear what you have to say. Comment below and let me know if you've tried either of these, or if you disagree with what I'm saying. And you might as well go ahead and subscribe while you're down there. Now, before I started this challenge, there's one program that everyone said was better than Photoshop, and I really doubted it, but I might be a believer now. You're gonna have fun with this one. Let me show you around. First impressions, wow. Maybe I've been in my Photoshop bubble a little too long because this makes me excited about designing. I usually consider myself a rebel when I start new programs, and I never go through the tutorials, but this made me want to see what's possible. Alright, that's enough vowels. Let's get started with our tutorial. I picked something really intense this time because I really want to push the limits of Affinity. So first let's create our background. I created the base file in Photoshop and dragged it into Affinity. The visibility of the layer is on the right in Affinity, so we'll turn that off and create a new fill layer. Now, you may have noticed that Affinity looks pretty similar to Photoshop, but when it comes to adjustment layers, it's a little bit tricky. Let's move our prism layer to the top and change the blending mode to screen so that we can see through it a little bit. I want to remove some of the color from this image, but to do so, I have to create an adjustment layer. I've changed my color, but now I have to make the adjustment layer the child of the parent layer in order to affect that layer.
I'm sorry, what are you talking about?
Never mind. Let's skip ahead to the fun stuff and start putting our bottle together. Now, Affinity has a decent subject selection tool, but there are a number of adjustments you should probably make to get it really fine-tuned to your subject. Once I have my selection, if I click this quick mask tool, I can see what's been selected, and it's not so great. So let's go into the Refine tool. Without even making any adjustments, Affinity already senses what should be changed and it refines the selection. And now we have our bottle. Let's bring our label into the picture and size it down a bit. And now let's work on the shadows for the label. The great thing about Affinity is a lot of the tools and layers work like they would in Photoshop, so the learning curve is kind of short. We have to bring our highlights back, so let's make a mask for the first layer. And then with the brush tool selected, let's change our foreground color with the shortcut key. Doesn't look like it's working. All right, well, let's go into the color picker. Oh, you were doing so well, Affinity! Good thing Affinity has autosave. And a quick reminder, if you're thinking of moving to Affinity, download my free guide to learn all of these shortcuts and more. Let's skip ahead a bit and start putting our oranges in. Let's give it a shadow and a little bit more dimension. And I'm going to make a few slight adjustments so it looks like the pieces have a little bit of space between them. The adjustment layers were a little bit tricky, but the masking feature is pretty much exactly how it is in Photoshop, so it makes it easy to make adjustments to your image. One thing I did notice is that a lot of the tools and features are kind of spread out in Affinity, so learning the shortcuts is going to be crucial. And I just added a fill layer with a mask to add a little bit of a highlight to the orange. And I'll add a few more objects into our composition just to fill out the space a little bit. It's already looking really good, and other than a few minor glitches, I'm really impressed by how easy Affinity has been to get used to. Now, I'm not going to bore you with every single step of the tutorial, but I have to say that I was super impressed by how easy it was to complete the whole Photoshop tutorial in less than 6 hours. Let's go to the debrief and I'll give you some insight on what really happened. Besides a few minor glitches that I came across when I was using Affinity, I have to admit it's pretty solid. But one thing I didn't tell you is that this is my first time ever using Affinity. So to be able to transition from Photoshop that quickly, definitely a plus. Now, Affinity has some really great tools and pretty much everything Photoshop has to offer and more, but where it falls a little short is in the AI category. Photoshop pretty much has the edge on everyone, but as far as advanced features like non-destructive editing or raw processing or even its masking selection tools, you can tell that Affinity's team is really working hard to give Photoshop a run for its money. Let's take a look at the price of Affinity compared to Photoshop. Affinity is not free. Just like the old Photoshop pricing, you pay one flat price and it's yours for good. But that doesn't necessarily give you a green light, because if you look online, there's still some mixed reviews on whether it's as good as Photoshop. But here's my take. If you're looking for a solid design program that's not going to lock you into crazy pricing or privacy concerns, then I definitely think Affinity is worth it for you. No, it's not Photoshop, but it's a very solid program that's growing and it's going to catch up at some point. I'm going to give Affinity a solid B+, and I'll also give it the crown for the best competitor to Photoshop. Okay, so now that you've seen the best Photoshop alternatives, join me in this next video where I'm going to show you my actual favorite pick for fast design. It's Canva. And in just 10 minutes, I'm going to teach you how to master Canva and create a digital product that's making sellers on Etsy $8,000 a month. Join me in the next video and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of these future tutorials. I'll see you there.